Have you ever had one of those days, or maybe an entire weekend, where your body just refuses to cooperate? The alarm goes off, the to-do list is there waiting for you, and yet you physically cannot make yourself get vertical. Everything feels heavy. Your brain is foggy. Even brushing your teeth sounds like climbing Mount Everest. You're not sick and you're not necessarily depressed. You're just stuck. If that sounds familiar, you are in good company. I've actually been there a few times recently myself. Millions of us are walking around in this exact state right now, and most of us have no idea why or what is actually happening inside of our bodies. Today, we are going to fix that. Up next on Master Your Marriage. Hello there, friend, and welcome back to the show. I do have a little bit of bad news today. Robert isn't going to be here today on this episode, so you're stuck with just me. I know he is the fun one, but speaking of being stuck, that is what I want to talk to you guys about today, that feeling of being stuck. And the reason Robert isn't here is because this is a last-minute addition to the podcast. We weren't planning on running this episode this week, but with all of the heaviness in the world right now, I personally have been feeling some of that stuckness myself, a little bit of brain fog, a little bit of shutdown, zoning out. And so I want to share with you how and why this happens. And I also want to share with you some very practical coping strategies that will actually nurture your nervous system. You see, a lot of times we use coping strategies that don't really help us. In fact, there's been a viral trend on social media, particularly TikTok, the past couple of years, where people talk about bed rotting. And that is this idea of just laying in bed or on the couch all day long, staring at screens. And I want to talk about that and address that today too. So today, we're going to be talking about the difference between real restorative rest and what your nervous system is doing when it hits the brakes and shuts everything down. You're going to learn the 3 states of your autonomic nervous system, how the window of tolerance you've heard me talk about in past episodes maps into those 3 states. We're going to talk about what makes that window get wider and narrower. And we're going to talk about how to tell which state you're actually in and why your body sometimes chooses to play dead over taking action. And most important of all, we're going to talk about some gentle research-based steps that you can take to get your body to come back online without trying to force yourself through sheer willpower. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's dive in. First, let's understand what's really going on under your hood. Your autonomic nervous system, sometimes also called the automatic nervous system, because it's the part of you that runs automatically without you having to think about it. And it has 3 primary modes. And this framework is something that we've shared on the podcast before, and it comes from polyvagal theory, and it was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. Now, state number 1 of your nervous system, there's 3 primary states, remember. So state number 1 is called the ventral vagal state. And this is also your safe and social mode, which means you can feel calm, but also alert. You can think clearly, you can connect with people, you can be relational with people, especially your spouse. You can enjoy your day. You can also recover in this state. Actually, this is where genuine rest and healing can actually happen. State number 2 is the sympathetic state. This is, we'll call it your mobilization system, your fight or flight state. And in this state, your heart rate is up, your energy is surging, you're ready to move. And in this state, you might feel a little bit of anxiousness. You might feel irritable. You might feel wired even. And you might act in ways that are maybe less desirable. You might be impulsive or aggressive or reckless, or even a little bit of out of control. It's not necessarily a comfortable state, but at least you're activated. We're not going to talk a lot about this state today. We're going to talk more about the 3rd state, number 3, which is the dorsal vagal state. And this is the oldest part of our nervous system, the one that had to evolve to keep us alive when fighting or running away just wasn't an option. When you can't fight or flee, it's time for your body to play dead. Your body is attempting to conserve energy by basically hitting the off switch. So you feel numb and heavy and disconnected or foggy. Some people often experience time blindness in this state as the time just seems to sort of slip away. Even getting out of bed can physically seem impossible, even though you logically want to get out of bed. This is your nervous system's last ditch effort to protect you when it decides that the threat is something that is too big and the action, whether that would be to flee or to fight, just won't help you. Now, if you've worked with me in couples coaching or you've listened to this show for a while, you've definitely heard me talk about the window of tolerance before. So, this next little piece that we're going to talk about is going to feel a bit like a perfect puzzle piece that we're going to click into place here. These three states that I just mentioned, the ventral vagal, the sympathetic, and the dorsal vagal, are the same three states that you see on a window of tolerance chart. If you haven't seen a window of tolerance chart, it's really easy to go online and search or Google for a chart and you'll find one quickly. Or you can just imagine it as I describe it. Picture your nervous system is like a giant window. Inside your window is your optimal operating zone. When life pushes you above that window, then you go into what's called hyper arousal mode. And this is where we have excessive activation of the sympathetic nervous system, or again, that fight or flight response where you feel anxious, wired, irritable, heart racing, and can't settle down. But when it pushes you below the window, that's where you drop into hypoarousal, again, feeling shut down, numb, heavy, foggy, like you're moving through molasses. The beautiful thing is that your window isn't a fixed size. It can widen or it can narrow down depending on how you are living. There are things that can widen your window and give you more capacity and more resilience. So that's things like getting consistent sleep, getting good amount of sleep, eating nourishing foods, having safe relationships around you, doing some kind of movement that you actually enjoy doing, whether that's yoga or lifting weights. These are all practices that can literally train your nervous system to handle more stress without tipping you outside of your window in either direction. Then there's things that can narrow your window and make you more likely to fly up into hyperarousal or down and collapse into hypoarousal and shut down. So what are some of the things that narrow your window? That's things like chronic stress, unresolved trauma, poor sleep, poor consistency of sleep, isolation, loneliness, overstimulation, skipping meals, not having good nutrition, and trying to push yourself to do things that are beyond your limit without giving yourself that recovery time. And all of these things, of course, are going to shrink the window. The more your window shrinks, the smaller the trigger needs to be to send you flying up into that hyperarousal state or down, sinking down and collapsing down into that shutdown state. And that's why two people can have and face the exact same situation, the same workload, and one stays steady within their window while the other one ends up bed rotting for 3 days because their windows are totally different sizes. So let's talk about bed rotting. I want to get into that. So this is a trend you might have seen on social media, especially TikTok. And this is where people stay in bed or on the couch all day, scrolling, snacking, napping. And many of them are posting about it and calling it like a radical self-care or a recovery day. But is it really? I mean, I can kind of see the appeal. We're all probably exhausted a lot of the time by the hustle culture that we live in. And the idea of declaring a full day to be horizontal sounds pretty glorious. So, how do you know if you're actually resting your nervous system? Well, here's the nuance that most of those videos and most people, frankly, miss. Bed rotting is rarely about resting. It's usually a mix of something called passive consumption and going down into that shutdown mode. You think you're resting, but your nervous system is either numbing out or it's protecting itself. And that's why you can spend 12 hours in bed watching Netflix and wake up feeling even more drained than before. So are you numbing or actually resting? That is the big question. And the answer is to look at what you're doing while you're horizontal. And that will tell you where your nervous system is really at and what you're actually accomplishing. So let's define these different states of rest. So, genuine rest, again, genuine rest is going to happen when you're in your window, in the ventral vagal state where you're still active, but you're active in a gentle way. What would that look like? That would look like taking a slow walk outside, maybe calling a friend who makes you laugh, that makes you feel good. Maybe it's reading an actual book with actual paper. Maybe it's meditating. Maybe it's going to a yoga class. Most importantly, when you finish, you feel recharged and you feel like you can transition back into life and back into your day without dread. Then there's what most of us call rest, but it's actually passive consumption. This is doom scrolling. Doom scrolling for 4 hours, binge watching 3 seasons of Bridgerton, snacking all day long and staring at multiple screens. You're not in a full shutdown. You're not into a full hypoarousal, but you're also not recovering either. You're hovering at that line or right below that hypoarousal line, and your nervous system is stuck. It's stuck in a low grade stress loop because it's constantly taking in stimulation without ever processing or discharging it. And this is exactly where I have caught myself going a few times over the last few weeks. Passive screen time may help you temporarily because you're being distracted, but your energy and your mood at the end of it are the same or even worse when you finally stop your doom scrolling. You're hovering right there at that edge of the window or slightly below that window of tolerance. And then there's that true dorsal vagal shutdown, which is way below the window where you feel heavy, numb, dissociated. You can't think clearly. Even small decisions feel overwhelming. You might describe it as sort of watching your life from the outside or moving through a fog. And this isn't laziness. This is your nervous system. Okay, so let's take all of this information we just talked about and let's make this really practical. How do you know which state you are in and where you are relative to your window? Here are the clearest signals. So if you're in your window, in that genuine recovery state, that ventral vagal state, you know you're in that state when you feel calm and present, when your thoughts are clear, when you're making conscious choices about how to spend the time, when you feel recharged afterwards, not worse. You can also easily shift back into action when you're ready and you feel connected to yourself and to others. That's how you know you're in that zone. So, how do you know when you're in passive consumption? That, again, you're probably right there at the edge or slightly below the window. You'll know this because you're scrolling or watching something, but you're not really enjoying it. Time seems to disappear without you noticing it. You feel slightly zoned out or numb. You could get up if you had to, but you really don't want to. You feel a low hum of guilt and you don't feel better when it's over. Okay, let's look at the third. How do you know when you're in full shutdown? Well, again, this is when you're well below that window of tolerance. So you feel heavy, numb, completely dissociated. Thinking and making decisions feels impossible. Getting up feels physically impossible, totally out of reach. You feel worse, not better, even after hours of bed. You feel isolated, like you're watching your life from a distance. Something is being avoided, even though you're not even sure you can name what it is. Now, if you're nodding along to that last list that I just shared with you, then your nervous system has decided that the demands in front of you are too much for your current window size. And it doesn't have to be, like our ancestors, it doesn't have to be a saber-toothed tiger anymore that you're fighting. It could literally just be an overflowing inbox. It could be financial pressure. It could be grief that you haven't processed, or even just the uncertainty of life right now, the fears in the world, the uncertainty perhaps in your own relationships. all of that can trigger that same ancient response. Now, I do want to make a really quick distinction. I want to note that this is different from clinical depression. Even though they can overlap, depression is a diagnosable condition, health condition with specific criteria, whereas shutdown is a nervous system state. And you can be shut down without meeting the criteria for depression, and you can be depressed without being shut down. So understanding that distinction and where you are relative to your window helps you to choose the right tools. So when does occasional shutdown become a problem? Well, it becomes a problem when it turns into your default coping strategy. Gosh, that was a lot. Is there actually any good news here, Charla? Yes, you can gently shift out of it and start widening that window again. But the goal is to never bully yourself with willpower. That's almost always going to backfire. One of my very favorite quotes comes from therapist Terry Real, and he says, "There's nothing that harshness can do that loving firmness can't do better." And that applies to how we treat people and also how we treat ourself, our inner self, and our inner child. So instead of bullying ourselves into our window, which isn't going to work, we want to work with our own biology to move from dorsal vagal shutdown back towards ventral vagal safety, or more simply put, getting back inside of our window. And we'll need to do that one little step at a time. And we're going to go through those steps right now. So these are 6 steps that have been shown to be most effective, research supported. These are strategies that actually work when you're stuck at or below, especially below the window when it's hard to re-engage with life. Step number 1, you want to start with the smallest possible movement. Start by wiggling your toes, flex your feet, stretch your fingers out. Just each one of these little micro movements, just these teeny, teeny little movements, sends safety signals to your nervous system that says, hey, we're still here, we can still move, and it's safe. The next step, step 2, is you want to engage your senses. You want to ground yourself to the present using your 5 senses. And there's a technique called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique is where you say 5 things. You can either say them inside or you can say them out loud. 5 things that you can see right now. So I see my lights in our podcast studio. I see my microphone. I see my computer. I see a mirror. I see a camera. Okay. So you're going to list 5 things that you can see, then 4 things that you can touch or feel, then 3 things that you can hear, then 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Even if you have to grab a cup of water or grab a cup of coffee and drink it and then name the thing that you can taste. And here's why this is so powerful. When you're in dorsal vagal shutdown or you're below that window of tolerance, your nervous system has disconnected from the present moment. That's why you feel dissociated. Your brain is either numb or it's looping on the overwhelming thing that you are avoiding. But by systematically naming sensory things around you, you send repeated safety signals up the vagus nerve, which is telling your brain, I'm here, I'm safe, there's no immediate threat, I'm safe. Now, if this was too much to remember or too much to do, what you could do is pick a color and name everything in the room that you can see that matches that color. And that's an easy thing you can do. Okay, the third strategy is to use your voice. That would be, you could hum a song, take audible breaths, you could sing, you could hum, you can read out loud, you can talk to yourself. Anything where you're using your voice is going to activate that vagus nerve. The vagus nerve connects directly to your throat and to your face. And your own voice is one of the fastest ways that you can pull yourself back inside the window. Okay, another strategy. This would be the 4th thing that I would do. I would get vertical. So once you've done a little movement, a little bit of grounding, it's time to sit up all the way up and then stand up. And there's all kinds of research actually out there on posture and how it impacts our mood. There was a study done at Harvard. There's been some TED Talks on this, but your posture absolutely impacts your mood. And the research shows that upright positioning improves your emotional state faster than we expect, and it helps lift you up out of that hypo arousal state. Number 5, name what it is that you're avoiding, but do it gently. So at this point, you've got your body activated. Name what it is that you're avoiding. Shutdown is almost always protective. You're almost always it's your nervous system trying to protect you. You don't have to solve it just yet. You don't have to fix the problem at this point. You just want to get curious. What is it in my life right now that is just too big to face? And sometimes just naming it without the pressure to fix it starts to loosen up the grip and helps you to begin to widen your window. And then lastly, number 6, do a reality check on your bandwidth and stop comparing. Your current window size is your real bandwidth. So make a brain dump list of everything that's on your plate right now. Ask yourself, what am I doing out of genuine desire versus obligation? And what can realistically come off of this list? The goal here isn't to do more. The goal is to build a life that matches the window that you actually have right now in this moment. And then every time you do that, you start to widen that window, which of course widens and expands your capacity. So let's wrap up this episode. I know this has been a lot, but so let's kind of wrap it up with a clear recap. What is the difference between real recovery, passive consumption, and hypoarousal? Recovery happens inside the window of tolerance. And you know you're in recovery because it actually restores you. Passive consumption is happening right there at that edge, and that's there to numb you. And in that state of passively consuming screens, that's where time will disappear, and afterwards you will not feel better. And then the third state is that full shutdown of hypoarousal, where you're well below the window of tolerance. Remember, your nervous system does everything with good intent. It's doing this to protect you and because it feels compelled to for safety, but doing so also keeps you stuck. So when you notice yourself sliding or into that state of hypoarousal, start with the micro movements, then go to your 5 senses, then activate your voice, then get vertical, name what it is you're avoiding, and then check your bandwidth. And over time, you'll be able to catch the pattern earlier and earlier. You'll start to notice when you're slipping, and you'll start widening that window so that the same stressors don't continue to knock you out anymore. Your nervous system is not broken. Your nervous system is not lazy. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do to keep you safe. Our job is to continually try to update that software we were given so that safety can happen in a place of action and in a place of connection and in a place where life is being built that actually feels good. So there you go. You now have the map. You have the tools. You don't need to stay stuck. Remember, small, gentle changes do add up. Your nervous system is always listening and it's ready to come back inside your window. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If today's episode landed, take one tiny action right now. Wiggle those toes, hum a little tune, and just name one thing you've been avoiding. You've already started the shift. Robert and I will see you on the next episode. Take care of that beautiful nervous system of yours and take care of each other. Remember to put each other first. It's the small things done often that create the biggest impact. Until next time.